Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and as we wrap up 2025, we're going to discuss in this episode some of the challenges and the opportunities that we've experienced as a pregnancy help movement this year. Maybe we'll speculate a little bit into the new year and what we're looking towards. Today, we're joined by Heartbeat International President Jor-El Godsey, Vice President of Communications and Marketing Andrea Trudden, and we welcome for the first time on the podcast Jessica Prol Smith, our Director of Government Relations. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. I'll drop a link in the notes to Pregnancy Help News so that our listeners can subscribe to stay up to date on the latest news, including some of the stories that we'll be discussing today. So, Jor-El, I'll turn things on over to you.
Well, thanks, Christine. It's been an adventure in the last several months since we talked at the 100 days mark a while back, referencing the Trump administration and all the things that have been going on. But as you can imagine, with the whirlwind that those first 100 days were, it's like that's only continued and continued to grow. And there's been some big battles along the way, both at the federal level and then, of course, in some other areas around the country. But we really wanted to catch up with where things are at, and particularly related to, and I say the Trump administration, but I'm really talking about the federal level. Like, so Congress is its own thing. And so perhaps we're going to frame it within the context of the Trump administration, but it isn't necessarily all about Trump and what he's doing, although, of course, he may prefer it that way. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what everybody's doing if we can, and if we can cover that ground. But I first want to introduce you to kind of a new face on the Heartbeat team that some of you may have not had a chance to meet yet. And if you haven't, you're missing out. Jessica Prol Smith joined the Heartbeat team really towards the end of the summer. And she has jumped in with both feet. Turns out we thought Jessica was joining the Heartbeat team, but it feels like it's more about Heartbeat joining the Jessica team, because she knows like a ton of people at the federal level, came to us from many years involved with the movement, worked at Family Research Council, right? Is that right?
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, that's right. FRC, Alliance Defending Freedom, and also congressmen and senators. And it's been a great privilege to have her join the team. And so we are grateful to have her. And really, she's been the one that's been focusing on really what's been happening at the federal level primarily. And such a great opportunity window for us in the Trump administration that at least is welcoming pro-life activity. May not be championing as much as we would want to, but there have been several wins that we want to talk about, even going back to the beginning, but also covering really the last 10 months or 11 months of this administration. So, Jessica, remind us some of the wins that we've gone through and that we've experienced, and we can help us remember to say yay for some of the good things that have happened.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for the intro, Jor-El. It's really good to be here and introduce you to my network. You talked about it on the last podcast, but we are encouraged to see that the Trump administration jumped in right away, working to enforce the Hyde Amendment, federal effort to make sure that our tax dollars do not go directly to fund abortion within the United States. Also in January, the administration moved forward on the Mexico City policy, and so that's making sure that our taxpayer dollars do not fund abortion abroad. In the month of February, I believe the Trump administration established the White House Faith Office, and there's been some good work over there, and they're attentive to the work of pregnancy help organizations. And then there's been some good traction since then, more recently as well, and we can dive into that.
Well, yeah, I think we had some particularly big win with the One Big Beautiful Bill, and that brought us some things that, frankly, something that we had never thought would happen, and that was at least the for 1 year defunding of a significant portion of what Planned Parenthood was receiving. That was a big win from the One Big Beautiful Bill that we are grateful for. Anything else that we might point at in that same time frame?
Sure. We were glancing over executive orders directly from the administration in my kind of walk through, but looking over at what Congress and the president pulled off, we're encouraged that the One Big Beautiful Bill moved forward with an actual defunding of abortion providers, including Planned Parenthood. Now, that's been punted back and forth in the courts in the months since that bill was signed, since July 4th. But at the moment, it is the defund provision is holding, and Planned Parenthood will have to, appeal that to the Supreme Court if they want to claw back those dollars. I imagine they might do that. We're also encouraged by the family policy movement and the Trump accounts in encouraging people to plan ahead and be able to financially invest. They're not necessarily going to enjoy those dollars right away, but kids can be expensive, and having the government help a little bit in the savings and planning for children is a really encouraging movement as well.
Well, it feels like that's something that's at least we can um, take some solace in the fact that there are positive family developments. If not the flat out pro-life gains and pro-life championing that we would want from our both our executive and our legislative branches, we would want more. But we can at least see good things that we're operating in contrast to what has been really policies of the past that have really serve to really diminish families. So anything is something good, and we could always do better, and we certainly are hoping for better. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But are there
Yeah.
other things that the Senate is working on, things that are active in process, or Congress is working on that are active in process that we are mindful of?
Sure. Well, we are watching a couple bills that have been introduced. As we all know, the margins are close enough that it would be difficult to move standalone legislation forward. But we are encouraged still by seeing bills like the Conscience Protection Act, one that would enhance protections for medical professionals who do not wish to provide abortion. A similar one, Conscience Protections for Medical Residents Act, that would seek to change the system so residents would need to opt into abortion training rather than opt out of it when they're the low man on the totem pole and could be penalized for that decision. We're also keeping an eye on the Second Chance at Life Act, legislation that would require medical professionals to alert women to the possibility of abortion pill reversal. And, there's obviously more details on that, but encouraging women who have regret or second thoughts to know about that protocol. And then more recently, the Forced Abortion Prevention and Accountability Act, enhancing or actually creating federal federal consequences for the abuse of chemical abortion or the use by a partner or other individual poisoning of a woman using abortion drugs, rather than seeing that litigated simply at the state level.
Which
So,
we wish were not an issue, but we're
yeah,
finding is actually happening more and more. There's actually now multiple cases, multiple state lawsuits brought, but this is the idea that it really is something that might be worthwhile handling from a federal perspective to create a broader, particularly given the fact that there's such a insistence upon shielding abortion states and shielding
Mhm.
abortion providers that it might even require a federal approach to be able to overcome some of the state specific things where one state, and we're seeing this, the I think the case out of Louisiana where there was an abortion that was provided by a New York doctor, and the New York government is basically saying, nope, we're not gonna help you. We're not gonna do anything to help you prosecute that doctor who basically facilitated an abortion, an unwanted abortion, and without consent abortion upon
Mhm.
a woman in Louisiana. And I think there's a similar one in Texas as well that we're mindful of. And and this is one of those things that's a real adventurous a conversation about abortion states and life states. And I've said this before, and I will say it again. We have become something that we know is from our past, but back then, 150 years ago, we called them slave states and free states. And there were rules and there was entanglements between the states when a slave would manage to escape one state. And then some of the state leaders says, oh no, we're allowed to go into your state and get our property and bring it back to ours. And as reprehensible as that sounds to us now, that's the way it was, and that was the argument between states. And so we're now seeing a form of that played out between abortion states and life states, which is what makes a federal approach something to
Mhm.
be mindful of. We need to be attentive to these things because they have larger repercussions.
Certainly. Well, we're talking largely about the federal level tug of war or challenges on these issues, but we do know that state attorneys general are, tugging at the rope in both directions, and it's helpful to have some good conservative attorneys general doing good work.
That's right. And Andrea, as kind of the person that oversees our pregnancy help news and watches out for Lisa and her team of writers, and you keep glued to this information as well very closely. And I know you've been watching some of these things as well.
Yeah, actually, even just talking about the shield laws and all the different interesting things that we've had to navigate just this past year, there was a really interesting report that published, I think in August, from JAMA, and it had actually published the fact that Aid Access, which is an online abortion industry in a way, they monitored them for 15 months up through July. And in that time period, they had sent more than 100,000 pills to women, 100,000 abortion pills. Well, maybe to women. Now we're finding that men and women and anybody can get access to this. And it was shown that in that Aid Access study, over 80% of those went to pro-life states. So this is something that must be looked at from a federal level in order to protect women. But then also just to keep tabs as to what is going on in our country, what is happening, and then keeping the sovereignty of the states when people go to the voting booths and they vote in pro-life laws and or pro-life individuals to uphold those laws. And then shield states just come in and say, yeah, you know what, we don't need to worry about that. That's a problem, and it should be addressed at a bigger level. And we have been watching just the situations like that, in addition to the lawsuits that we're seeing. You noted Louisiana and Texas. I believe Massachusetts and Illinois is actually in there too, because people are taking advantage of this opportunity in heinous ways, and women are being hurt by it. So it is, we were grateful to see the new bills being introduced that are addressing these harms to women. And we are watching those very closely and hope to see more movement on those, because it is something that is unexpected. And as laws change in the country, you typically have to then figure out how to navigate those. And we are pretty certain that this is going to somehow sooner or later get up to the Supreme Court, because when you have one state with one rule and another state saying, forget that, we're overriding you, that's a problem. And we've seen it in our nation before, and we're ready to see it again. We're confident in everything that we are watching through the pregnancy help movement and just getting encouragement out there. Awareness is key so that people know where they can go, so they don't find themselves in such a desperate situation that they are just looking online for whatever is available, and or hopefully they are coming across pregnancy help organizations. They don't feel the propaganda that they're seeing where different media outlets are portraying that women have no place to turn when abortion is not available. We know that that is far from true, with nearly 3,000 pregnancy help organizations in states, all 50 states, and available to serve. As we talked about around Dobbs and everything, our services are adjusting slightly, but overall, we've still been there and ready to receive these women and adjusting services as needed so that we can provide the best care. And that's been something that we've been watching very carefully, as you noted, and seeing where different laws are taking us in different states. But we're always proud to share the stories that we get from the centers, from the women who are grateful for the help that they are getting and knowing that they have a positive place to turn.
That's a shout out for Pregnancy Help News, by the way. If you're not a regular consumer of pregnancyhelpnews.com, we encourage you to be on that list. We have over 30,000 subscribers who get a digest of that every week. Maybe visit the website more often, but it's a great compilation of all good things that we know are happening on the political level that directly relate to pregnancy help, and then are some of the tangential things that we're dealing with. And something that Jessica was some of the things that Jessica talking about is maybe not as directly related to us in the pregnancy help movement, but are important because they are legal battles that will have that will echo into other arenas. And so even like you talk about the medical conscience rights. Like those are things we've seen those attacks. We saw those attacks very specifically in Illinois. Our friends at NIFLA went after that in kind of the wake of it was Illinois actually upped the ante from the California their law that they put into place to try to make pregnancy centers speak government speech in favor of abortion. Illinois did something even more. They actually were requiring pro-life doctors and nurses to make referrals to abortion providers, and they were trying to actually go around what was considered at the time a gold standard of conscience rights among the states was Illinois, and yet so Illinois was effectively saying, yes, of course you have your rights of conscience unless it occurs in an abortion situation, and then we're going to trample on your rights of conscience not to refer that and make you. And all of that are key lessons that we learn, that the abortion folks are simply not lying down. They're being very aggressive in their efforts, and we're grateful for some of our federal friends who are saying, you know what, not only should this not happen in Illinois or any of the life states, it should not happen anywhere in the U.S. And so it remains to be seen where those will go, but it's opportunity for us to recognize that these are big conversations that don't just specifically relate to pregnancy health, but are very much something we should be mindful of and be watching for. Okay, so I want to kind of turn. One of the things that we got into this that Jessica got to experience, she's now seen it from both sides. We used, we've been going to visit Congress for many years in a row now. In fact, we've been doing it since 2009. Had over 400 office visits over that time. We go at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. Back in the day, we actually went 4 times in the first couple of years. That was a bit crazy, but we did it. And Jessica, at some point in the past, was on the other side receiving us into some offices, and so now she got to experience it from the first side. We had some great teams roaming around, and we had a special opportunity as well. But let's talk about, so what was it like, Jessica, experiencing Babies Go to Congress from the side of those that are visiting?
It was great to help lead our pregnancy centers and maternity home and a mobile unit, individuals serving in those capacities, introduce them to their members and staff. So we went to DC in the shadow of a shutdown. There were fewer staff in the offices. There were shorter lines. That was one benefit. But it did mean it was a little bit trickier to land all the meetings that we were hoping for. But it was a great privilege to be able to coordinate and then sit down with staff members and connect the babies and their moms and the pregnancy help leaders with their elected representatives. As you can imagine, some of those conversations were a little bit more delightful and reciprocal in nature. Jor-El, you and I were in one conversation where there was a clear difference of opinion about the value of life. But even there's this ability to kind of smile and nod and say, I'm glad your choice for life, you found a place for that to be supported. Hopefully that was an authentic, shared bit of common ground. But we had people coming in from Indiana, Bella Vita Pregnancy Center and Maternity Home, North Carolina, Hand of Hope Pregnancy Centers, Tennessee with Confidential Care Mobile Ministry, and Virginia, Mary's Shelter, a maternity home there. So a privilege as well to connect these individuals with some friends in the pro-life movement. The Heritage Foundation fed us lunch and gave us a place to rest our feet. And then we also had a memorable meeting on the White House grounds. And we had the chance to hear stories and encouragement from the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner. Encouraged by his enthusiasm for the movement. It's very clear he knows who we are and what we do. And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is talking, sharing her personal stories about value of motherhood and why it matters so much. And a couple other voices really encouraging us in what we do. It overall encouraged to see a White House on the right side of history, on the right, supporting who we are and what we do. And hopefully over time, we'll continue to deepen that, deepen their understanding and encourage even more movement to promote life and protect families.
Well, and that's something of note. I think it's fair to say, and I think it would be accurate to say, we would not have been received so well by a Harris administration. That's typically what happens. Unfortunately, it should be otherwise, right? Everybody should be able to celebrate moms making a choice for life and helping make that happen. But it's such that we don't typically get the opportunities. But it was great to have that opportunity. We had Caroline Levitt. I was personally excited to meet. Just given like you said, the motherhood, just how much she's taken on that role, and it's really been interesting. But I had not talked to Scott Turner before, but he's amazing. Secretary Turner's comes from the Dallas area. Preston, our friends at Prestonwood, very familiar with him. Grateful for his passion for us and for life, and for promoting that in this new role that he has. But it was really interesting. One of the most special moments was when Sunny Joy Nelson stepped to the stage. Now, she's not new to us. Andrea, tell us more about a little bit of the history of that story.
That's such a fun story. So Sunny Joy Nelson actually joined us at our Babies Go to Congress in 2019. And at that point, she joined us with her mother, Tanya Baker Nelson, who runs the Hand of Hope Pregnancy Center in North Carolina. And she actually came alongside a good friend of hers who had been a mother who was served through the pregnancy center, and her son Noah. So she got to experience all the halls of Congress and all the things that Babies Go to Congress comes with. In addition to joining us, we had the opportunity at that point to do a roundtable discussion with Vice President Mike Pence. So I'd like to say that we totally sparked the government bug for Sunny, but I'm pretty certain that she was born with that. And she has since pursued a career that has kept her involved in politics. And now she works within the communications department for the press secretary at the White House. And so when everything was coming together, she was very familiar with Babies Go to Congress, and we reached out to see about a possibility of having a meeting because, to be perfectly honest, it was definitely a dream. But then when the shutdown, we started to look for all the different plans that we might be able to do in case the government was not open at the time that we joined in. And so I'd love to say it was a backup plan, but it was also kind of alongside the whole time because it definitely was something that we were hoping for. And in the midst of the shutdown, they were on a skeleton crew, as were many of the members' offices. And they had actually stalled doing these briefings with people. It was something that, according to Caroline Leverett, they love to do, and they had to put it on hold. And so when the opportunity came up, they actually were really excited to be able to bring in the mothers, bring in the pregnancy centers, and host a little staff briefing on pro-life issues and pregnancy help, and welcome us into the White House grounds. So it was such a blessing, not only to us, but also, as you noted, the different administrative people within the room sharing their story, getting to meet the moms, playing with the babies. So as I often am, I was on the floor playing with the kids during the meeting to kind of just keep them occupied and everything. And I would look around and look at all the mothers listening to the speakers and looking across the room at Scott Turner and Caroline Levitt. And they just were glancing at these beautiful signs of life right in front of their eyes and the smile on their face. It's very genuine. And that was so refreshing. We were not just a meeting that they were ticking off. They were embracing the moment. And that was evident. And they, as you noted, they went up and gave us all a message of encouragement. But then Sunny Joy actually got to get up there and share her story, which was a delight to hear because her mother had an unexpected pregnancy with her. And she put it so beautifully. You can actually read her story on pregnancyhelpnews.com. But in it, she was saying, her father gave her mother an option of choosing him or her baby. And she said, we all see how that turned out, as Sunny Joy is speaking to us all in the room. So watching her mother, Tanya, receive this story with such pride and elegance was lovely to see. But then also to just see Sunny Joy up there speaking truth and speaking life so boldly and passionately. It was very beautiful. And it was received so well. And the mothers that we had with us were all very excited to meet her and just thank her for being so bold and sharing her story alongside them, because of course you're kind of a part of a group when you join Babies Go to Congress, because your mother's all in these situations or children in the situations. And so it really does automatically provide a sense of camaraderie where you just feel like you belong. And that was very, very special in that moment. But then, of course, being on the grounds with all of our colleagues and the pregnancy help organizations, being able to just put faces and stories to the names that they're hearing. It was really a valuable experience that I know the mothers treasure. They have reached out to thank us, and we're very grateful for the opportunity. But then just to be able to bring back that encouraging news to our staff and our affiliates as well was really good.
Well, that was one of the powerful reasons why to do Babies Go to Congress, was really to be able to project what is a pregnancy help organization into those situations. Because if we don't define who we are, someone else will, and someone else might not be as vested in our good as some of the folks that we interacted with. So it was important to do that. And to my knowledge, that was really Sunny Joy's first opportunity to really tell her colleagues her story. So it was a very special moment, and who knows, maybe she's available for banquet speaking. Probably not during this administration, because they keep them running hard and fast. But that's a powerful story to know that, hey, you just never know where saying yes to an unplanned pregnancy will go. And it's been we've had actually several instances of adults coming to Babies Go to Congress who were themselves they were the children of an unexpected, unintended pregnancy years ago. Some through maternity homes, as we had one represented this go around, and others who have been able to communicate that story like Sunny Joy themselves. We always welcome bringing along infants and toddlers, and some of the younger kids have been very. I was thinking of Victor, who was probably 8 or 9 when he could tell his own story, and it was delightful, powerful. But when it can happen in such a way where you can see the arc of their life and where God has brought them, it's just a testimony to what we don't know really the full impact of pregnancy help organizations. But it is amazing to get a glimpse of that powerful perspective in moments like that. So we're looking forward to Babies Go to Congress next time, and if you're interested. We're always putting out the word when we're ready to do that. So be on the lookout. If it's something that you're mindful of, we will host you when you get there. We're always looking for centers to come. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in a life state or an abortion state. We'll take either. We work with both. We don't, like Jessica mentioned earlier, we don't always get a warm, fuzzy reception. Often do, but don't always. But it's rarely is it even anything more than just curt and maybe a little stilted. But it's rarely it's never confrontational. It's always a positive experience. So if that's something that you're thinking about or would love to experience, be sure to let us know when the opportunity arises.
Well, and one of my favorite photos is Chuck Schumer giving a little guy a high five in the hallway, because you know what? They don't have to be necessarily on our side for this issue, but they can't deny the woman's story and how she was served and loved on by the pregnancy center. So it's a good opportunity through all the doors.
Yeah, we have had a handful of meetings like out in hallways and not just in their offices, but something, Jessica, you mentioned in giving, particularly I love that phrase, in the shadow of the shutdown. We were able to actually still have Babies Go to Congress, and yeah, it created some difficulties, but we were able to meet with a number of staff members, not so much as many congressional folks as we normally might be able to do, but we found that it's also important to communicate the message to the staffers in particular, because they're they are keys within really what the representative or the senator really is able to accomplish as far as the research that is done for bills, or even sometimes language is often proposed by a staffer. You've been on both sides of this now,
Yeah.
so you want to
Yeah.
speak to that about really the importance of not just the member receiving the information, but those around that are around them that help them formulate their strategy of how to respond to some of these things.
Sure. I have a vivid memory of my first visit to Congress as a kid. It was actually low key lobbying my congressman, and I was thoroughly disappointed when I spent time with the staffer instead of the member. I was like, I thought I was here to talk to the congressman, little eighth grader mindset. But as a staffer, you realize that if you're doing your job effectively, you are an extension of the member. You are helping to shape their understanding of an issue. You are funneling content to them. You're funneling stories. You're helping them choose between many priorities. And so, usually staff members choose to work for somebody with whom they agree on a wide majority of the issues, and especially on life issues, there is kind of a litmus test. So hopefully if you're talking about quote reproductive health or just telling the stories of pregnancy help to a pro-life member, you're actually talking to a staffer who has the boss's heart and mind and has the boss's back. But yeah, it's a great entryway. It's not the same as talking to the member themselves. This lowly staff member is not elected by the people, but if they're doing their job well, they're going to support their member and do that research, help nudge the policy in a direction or another. And so we had some fruitful conversations with staff and the beginning of realizing, oh, this member might be interested in helping write a letter on our behalf regarding tech censorship or other issues that we're facing on the ground.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where if even if they're not necessary, even in the role outside of shepherding their responsibilities to the member, they are also able to make connections, including with Heartbeat and including with if they have more awareness of the fact that, hey, there is an organization in my neighborhood or in my area that I can make sure people are aware of if the right issue comes before them. It's a value to be there for a host of reasons. And if you've thought about it or looking forward to it, we're always kind of casting the net in advance. Now, we didn't do it around the March for Life this year. Praise the Lord, because we would have landed it in 2025 in the middle of an inauguration, and it would have been. We thought the shutdown was messy. It's worse when we're dealing with like the transitions between administrations. That's a particularly challenging environment. But frankly, in January has its own issues. DC is not the warmest place to be necessarily in January, and we were able to get there in November, where it was at least delightful outside. We had no trouble navigating, and so we're already planning for 2026. It won't be in January, praise the Lord. But some of us will still be on the ground for the March and some other meetings, and so we're looking forward to that. So keep an eye out for the recruitment opportunities. If that's something you want, Andrea, what's a few things that they'll want to have together to jump in and say, I'm interested. What do I need to do?
Yeah, so what we do is we put out kind of that call for those who are interested. And what we strongly recommend at that time is already having a client in mind. And we just suggest you typically have a banquet and a mother who has shared her story there. That's a great place to start because you probably have already talked about her story with her, probably have used it in fundraising letters and updates. So it tends to be a little bit more polished and a really good story to already have at hand. You tend to have pictures at that point too. So what we do is we always review all the different stories and we put together, actually I'll grab some. I love our baby cards. We always put together little baby cards for the centers to have and the mothers. There's Victor. And on the back, it actually tells a little bit of their story. And we leave this behind with each office as well so that the member has a story to have at hand. And we have literally run into congressmen who've pulled it out of their jackets to say, I know him. I have that story because you guys were at my office. And it's like, oh, so good. It keeps the story front in mind. But having those details already are great. We will put together those story cards. We will put together the details and coordinate. We'll look across the nation to see if there are states that we haven't had any representatives from, because we do hope to hit all 50 states, and we're well on our way. And then we look at the different various organizations that we serve. So as Jessica noted, we had a maternity home as well as a mobile unit and some pregnancy centers this go around. We've had pregnancy centers that are connected with adoption agencies as well. We look for different scopes of services in order to educate a little bit more, because while some members may think they know what a pregnancy center is, there's always more room for us to educate them on. So we look for having those stories. We want you guys to check your dates and make sure that that is available. We will encourage you guys with some information. It's a great opportunity for you guys to, if selected, tout to your supporters, let them know what your plans are. It's a good fundraising opportunity. And then we provide photos along the way, and the video stories that we capture, anything that we have, we put them in a Dropbox so that everybody can have access to them and share them in their communications post-event as well. Because we do this for you. We do it for the movement. It's for people to be educated on, but also for the organizations that join in. We want to do everything that we can to continue to spread those good words about pregnancy help, educate, and then get into the different offices. We always go to 2 congressman offices and 2 Senate offices so that we can split it up. But we're going where you are constituents of, so that we can really hone in on the services that you are offering in their space, which is really important. And some great opportunities arise. I know that Jessica mentioned we didn't get too many members this year. However, we did get to see a few senators, and that was fantastic. And then, of course, getting on the grounds at the White House. So definitely doors are open. And as you're walking down the halls, you never actually know who you're going to run into. So it's always a really good opportunity that we strive to always be prepared for. We will never just send you down there and say good luck. We partner with you as Heartbeat International, and we walk alongside. We do an orientation to kind of walk through as well. We get to know the kids, and just enjoy being together, because it's very fun to be in the room for orientation where you have people from all over the nation coming together, and everybody's just really excited to just get to know one another, hear the stories, and play with little kids.
Yeah, well, the one thing I find that gets the most attention when we're walking the halls of Congress is a baby, right? They can have the most gruffest face, be holding a bunch of folders, scurrying along to the next meeting, but they walk by the baby and they can't help but look and smile, and it's like, yep, that's exactly right. That's what we're after. You can't ignore that. This is, by the way, this is what happens when we succeed. Lives are saved, hearts are changed, and it's a great way to celebrate that at the highest. And we encourage that happening not just in Washington, but everywhere across all the states, wherever possible. Happy to help coordinate that and help share what we know if you're interested in doing that. But we'd love to have you join us if we can. We look forward to it when it comes up in 2026, but it will not be January. That's not going to happen. We've learned our lesson as much as we try to do it. All right, Jessica, let's talk about some of the challenges. I think we touched on some earlier, some of the challenges that we're facing in the now. Like we see them, they're happening, they're unfolding before us. So tell us, what are you looking at mostly when you have your eyes in the direction of the federal efforts?
Sure. One of the largest challenges looming is the regulation of chemical abortion, and the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, is primarily responsible for that. As we've mentioned, we're grateful we have a Trump administration rather than a Harris based on the policies that are moving forward. But we are eager to see the FDA do its job more effectively when it comes to chemical abortion, mifepristone. There are REMS, risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, REMS for short. There are REMS in place surrounding the drug mifepristone, but they have been watered down significantly over the years. Perhaps most egregious is the 2021 policy eliminating the need for in-person dispensing. And it's difficult to track and to trace exactly how much damage is being done. But we know that men are able to access abortion drugs and force them upon their girlfriend or spouse. And why are men getting access to chemical abortions? Um, is a question I would raise. There are REMs, and so among other pro-life organizations, Heartbeat has been asking the FDA to do its job and restore the protections for women. If you've paid attention to the news in early December, there has been some reporting that the FDA is not moving at all on the study that it said it would be moving on. And it is really difficult to know who to believe and how far to trust the individuals there. It's kind of a black box. And so it kind of depends who you talk to and what conversation they've had with which individual. But yeah, there's plenty more to say about that. But we are one of many voices asking the FDA to respect the needs of women, even just focusing primarily at this point in time on the harms to women from chemical abortions.
Which of course are much more significantly higher in real world estimates. We saw that way back when in March. We were able to talk about that at our conference in Birmingham. We had actually Ryan Anderson was a keynote for us, able to who had just published that just a matter of weeks before, that the risk is as much as 22% higher than what the so-called clinical studies actually refer to. And so that information should be acted on much more quickly than it has. But we're mindful that there is, look, if we can get traction on that, hopefully they would be long term, because they would be based in the science, they would be based in the real world examples, and not just subject to political maneuvering, kind of the waves of one administration over another. So yes, we would want more to be done. Hopefully there are things that are happening more than what we can see. At least that's always my hope. I try to be optimistic. I'm not always successful about political things, but I want the best and believe the best of people until they show me otherwise. And usually politicians are really good at showing me otherwise. But for now, we're going to be continuing to harp on things. Even a Trump administration that is not being as explicitly pro-life as it was in the first go around, these are wins that we should be able to achieve. FDA, and the other one I've mentioned is the CDC. We should be able to get better reporting and be able to require good information. This is the craziest thing in the world, that we can have this major chemical floating around killing babies, by some estimates in the 800,000 range, and yet we don't have good reports, that good information at our government level that's able to really even speak to this. And in my mind, good information is required for good policy. And then that all that has to happen. These are things that we should all be able to agree to, is that we would have good information so that we can really evaluate. But it's the abortion distortion that's been kind of guiding that in the past. We've talked about this before, about how there are states that have simply refused to give information to the CDC, and of course our federal government has just accepted that. These are things that ought not be. And when they do give it to us, they give it to us in like it was 3 years ago, and it's almost not actionable information. So all of these things can be done better, even in an environment where you can't necessarily get all of the big pro-life wins that we would want. But there are still other things that we're fighting. Any other challenges we want to call out, Jessica?
Well, let's just regarding the FDA and the abortion pill study, regarding that conversation, I think Bloomberg, for example, reported that the commissioner, Marty Makary, is hesitant and wants to put off the study until the midterm elections, concerned about political implications. And one pro-life group put out a statement that really argues the opposite. I believe it was AUL, making the point that protecting women should be a political win, and pointing to polling specifically within the last 2 months that estimates about 7 out of 10 people, including self-identified pro-abortion, supporters of abortion, 7 out of 10 believe in the common sense policy of restoring in-person dispensing. So it's just a start. It's not the whole fight, but it would be a really valuable place to start. Other challenges, I mean, there are many. If you want to talk about the courts, there's some interesting action at the Supreme Court and a couple different rulings that could directly or indirectly affect pregnancy help. I want to take a moment just to mention the win from earlier this year regarding Medina versus Planned Parenthood. So that indicated that ruling allows states to direct Medicaid funding to qualified providers and to indicate that groups like Planned Parenthood do not fall into the category of qualified providers. So that's a win. There is a challenge and a joy to implement that win, and there's various fights and various work being done to empower states to make those decisions.
And that
But
came
then,
to us. That was a
yeah,
battle in South Carolina that
it
they were
was.
basically
Yes.
being told, no, you have to continue funding Planned Parenthood. And they're saying, no, we're a state. We can make our own decisions. The Supreme Court sided with the state of South Carolina in doing that. So we take the wins where we get them,
That was a win.
yep. So
Yes.
yay.
But then looking forward, we're watching a case called Childs v. Salazar, and I won't go too deep, but just top line is this is highlighting a counselor coming from Colorado where there were some serious limits to her free speech and her ability to use counseling, to use talk therapy to encourage children seeking relief from their gender dysphoria. So the state of California puts constraints on what she can say to these children. If somebody's coming and asking for help to be at peace with their sexuality, the body that they were born into, Miss Childs would be muzzled, would not be able to help them move in the direction of comfort in their own body, but would only be able to counsel them in the opposite direction. Obviously, that's not directly not directly related to pregnancy help, but it has implications for what counselors, for what individuals are able to convey to the women walking through their doors.
Well, isn't it? This would be very much connected to the idea of muzzling APR.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it should be a no-brainer that yes, a woman should be able to always have a right to continue her pregnancy. And yet we have states, Colorado being one of them, California, New York being others, Vermont as well. Colorado tried to do it directly. You have all these states are trying to muzzle really discussing APR. And so the ruling here could easily have a positive or a negative impact or connection with the very thing that we try to do. It's not as far away as it feels when it's like, oh, it's gender dysphoria. Like, I don't want to get into any of that conversation. Like that's just so much. And it's a lot, and but it's an important battle. But this particular one is could have immediate impact on what we do and our opportunity, at least relative to APR.
Right. It
If
pivots
not more.
it potentially more regarding issues of, tender issues where you're walking with someone during some of the most difficult moments or most complex decisions of their life. And so if the state can mandate what you do and don't say in that context, basically just because you're within the walls of a particular type of institution, the state is arguing that they can limit your First Amendment freedoms. And we would disagree with that assessment.
And
Yep.
we've seen that over in England with non-directive therapy. You're not even allowed to bring up an alternative to what they are asking for, which we've seen if you look into things happening in England, specifically in regard to APR and the battles that they've had. It's interesting forecasting for the very pro-abortion states because they're trying to implement these things that, as we see in England, at this point, you can literally get arrested for silently praying in your head. And so that's kind of the road that we're trying to guard against, or at least we're watching our friends guard against in the courts.
Try to.
Just
Yeah.
to clarify, Colorado wants to reclassify Ms. Child's speech as professional conduct. And so it's the argument over whether her conversation is professional conduct.
Well, the same thing though is our own battles in California and New York is that they're trying to classify our promotion of abortion pill reversal as commercial speech, even though
Mhm.
we don't benefit. We don't. It's not a service that we charge for. There's no commerciality about it, but that's the case that they're making, and that so these are not as disconnected as we might think. Any other quick challenges before we go to what we're watching?
Um, well, just have the ongoing challenge. I mean, there is a tug of war over, there has been a tug of war over whether IVF would be funded in the National Defense Authorization Act. It seems, a number of pro-life groups are watching that attentively. Obviously, we would like to protect and provide life, and many children are born using IVF as a method, but we also know, unfortunately, that many other children are lost or discarded in that process. And so pro-life organizations are keeping an eye on that.
I think I've heard Kristen Hawkins, our friend at Students for Life America, make the case that more lives are lost at IVF than even in abortion annually. Like that's a wild statement. It really begins to help frame the why this is an important conversation
Yeah.
for us nationally, and certainly something we should be attentive to. Um, yeah,
Another ongoing fight, something to notice, and a challenge to engage on. There's an ongoing debate over Obamacare subsidies.
yeah,
And so in that broader conversation, there, generally speaking, Democrats have been more enthusiastic to continue those subsidies, a subsidy for a program that is not performing up to the necessity of the American people. And so they wish to prop that up. That's a larger policy conversation. We're not going to debate that here. But, unfortunately, it does
we have
mean
we have a good 5 hours left, I think.
we may lose listeners, and I will be out of my depth on the nature of healthcare. It is complex. I mean, but just understanding that while premiums may go up dramatically in early January and there may be a tug of war, hidden under the larger policy conversation and political fight is also the conversation about whether those subsidies fund abortion, so the
That's right.
so-called Hyde protections. And so
That's
that's
right.
something we're watching. Many other groups are engaged. We are watching that, and will engage where it's appropriate.
Well, and I
But
think I think that's a good call out, Jessica. That's something that just something that we should be mindful of. It's and I mentioned earlier there's an abortion distortion, and it happens in all kinds of areas, and this is one of those. While the big headlines and big shrill talking points will be about Americans losing health care, underneath that is and we want to fund abortions and we want to help big abortion is a part of that conversation. And so depending upon where it goes and what there's talks about a deal being struck that gives room for things to happen, but it's also going to be interesting to see what is really going on with that particular question, the Hyde Amendment, which is can federal funds, taxpayer, by the way, subsidies should always be heard as taxpayer dollars, right? So whenever we're talking about subsidies or taxpayer dollars going to help with premiums or with anything health related, we always have to ask the question: are these funds going to support abortion?
Mhm.
Which makes it more challenging when we're engaging someone who is in the valley of decision. Like we want to help them feel like there is another path, and of course, if it's being paid for, then it's an even more easy path for them to be led down. So these are connected. They're important to watch, and don't look past the headlines. Be sure to look past the headlines to see the real story as far as where we're concerned.
Well, another thing we're watching, I don't know if you want to jump back to the Supreme
Absolutely.
Court. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's look there. This one is squarely about a pregnancy help organization, First Choice Women's Resource Center versus Plotkin. I could talk about this for a long time. Jersey girl, I spent about half my life there, and New Jersey is just doing it wrong. The Attorney General has been aggressive in chasing down information from a pregnancy care center. Anybody who listens who is running a center or participating knows that there's not a lot of extra bandwidth to provide documentation to a hostile government official, including donor information and private communications with your affiliate organization, including Heartbeat International. But that's exactly what the Attorney General of New Jersey has done. We could get into a lot more detail. I'd be curious what you think is the most egregious part, Andrea or Jor-El. But I will just note that the Attorney General's subpoena demanded private communication from center personnel without alleging any violation of the law or indicating that it had received a single complaint about New Jersey's First Choice Women's Resource Center, that network of pregnancy centers. And so the actual fight before the Supreme Court is whether First Choice can argue its case in federal court instead of waiting to get beaten up. It's in state court. And so there's a tug of war and an argument over whether the subpoena, I mean, in layman's language, I'm not an attorney, but there's a tug of war, a disagreement over how serious the subpoena actually was. And to hear New Jersey's attorney make the case that that wasn't a big deal, like should just sort of be considered a letter of recommendation, and therefore First Choice's rights were not actually, their speech was not actually chilled. They did not actually experience harm at that point. Donors weren't actually harmed or would not be harmed necessarily. They kind of want to have their cake and eat it too. Arguments went, layman's point of view, arguments went really well from our point of view, and we are eager to see how that goes.
There is no reason that this should not be a 9-0 SCOTUS thing. I thought Aaron Hawley and our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom did a great job arguing that. But you're right. It's like suddenly the word subpoena. And what's curious from a pregnancy health perspective, like we're told, like, oh no, like unless someone comes to you, you're to be confidential and keep your information as confidential as possible, unless required by law to do otherwise. And subpoena would be one of those ways that happens. And so like you don't get to, like you said, you don't get to have it both ways. New Jersey Attorney General, like that's the card that they're trying to play, and it's kind of ridiculous, and it should be slapped down quickly. We shouldn't have to wait till June for that decision. It should be 9-0. Should have been the decision should have come out the
From the
following
chair.
Monday. Yeah, from the chair. That's right.
Well, and Jessica did a really good job writing about this in Real Clear Politics. So if you go there and look up Jessica Prol Smith, you'll see the Jersey girl come out.
It was fun. I remembered or rediscovered New Jersey's motto is liberty and prosperity. And I was like, they're not really doing a good job on that. I wrote nerd essays about my state, 20 years ago. And like, come on. It's so egregious. A fishing expedition. We described it as a fishing expedition in our amicus brief before the court. And so we definitely have a vested interest in this one from multiple angles.
Well, and be sure that we will have Danielle White, our general counsel, join us and get some more in-depth perspective from actual lawyers. Neither Jessica or I or Andrea are lawyers. We don't try to pretend to be them, although I might have slept at a Holiday Inn last night.
We try to read their briefs and understand them.
Yeah, that's right. Any last thoughts? What are we watching for besides that decision? Anything else that we're looking for, Jessica?
Well, we are just putting one foot in front of the other. Certainly we care to see life promoted across different agencies. We are watching from time to time. There could be federal regulation coming out from HHS on Title X and designation of funds towards organizations that do or do not provide abortion. Looking toward, the Congress in partnership with the president, ideally, we would love to see progress on legislation like Let Pregnancy Centers Serve. And so providing greater protection for pregnancy help organizations and protecting them from hostility like has been exercised in New Jersey and other states. So yeah, keeping our ear to the ground. We're not in charge of the agenda necessarily, but where our input is asked, we are ready to connect pregnancy help with our leaders.
We're also looking forward. I mean, right here we're on the tail end of 2025. It's been quite an adventurous time,
Yeah.
but now we're looking towards 2026, and which means that there is a midterm election coming, with a couple of key things on the line. Not the
Yeah,
least of which is control of Congress, right? Because
absolutely.
if the pro-lifers don't, and I'm using that term particularly because, frankly, pro-life, value for life, sanctity of life should be not be a party specific thing. It should be something both parties find important and are able to pursue. But for now, the Republicans are the primary place for, I would eventually venture to say, almost the only place to find pro-lifers, at least on the Hill. And so that is going to be a big question, whether or not the whether or not pro-life voters will get out and vote their values. So it's always a good time. Andrea, we have some good resources for get out the vote. We've pushed these out to pregnancy centers. Look, there's questions about what you can do as far as promoting individual campaigns. That's actually a bigger question today than it ever was because there's more latitude, right? There's been increased latitude now. We've tend to move away from that as far as individually supporting candidates, but you can always encourage value voting, people that vote your values. So you should be messaging to your supporters the value to get out and vote. One, it's good citizenship, it's good stewardship, and then of course it makes sense that we want more people who have the same values that we have to be in positions of power to make good policy.
Yeah, and we always encourage that, and we will, as we near that time frame in the 2026, we will be pushing out some information for our affiliates and on our website about what you can do with those regulation or rules and such, so that you are aware. But then some samples as to what you can send out because we definitely want to encourage people to vote their values. Absolutely. And we do have the March for Life coming up too that I have to do a little plug for because
Yeah.
we are very excited. One of our friends who is an APR mom is going to be one of the speakers on the stage. So at the March for Life rally, Sarah Herm will be there to share her story. And I wouldn't be surprised if little Isaiah, who is about 6 years old now, makes an appearance to march as well. But it's such a good story. We've met with Sarah several times. She's such a huge champion for life and sharing because she's just so grateful for that information that she was able to find and get the word out a little bit more. So I had to do a little plug for the March for Life there too.
Well, I'm especially appreciative of the APR moms getting more of a voice. We're grateful for Rebecca Hagan, who's crisscrossing the country all year long, touting the message of APR. Sarah has done starting to do more of that. We're grateful for her. Others are getting the voice out. We've heard it in the background of some. Actually, the Texas conversation that we were talking about earlier has APR connected with it. So there are more and more babies being saved through the effective outreach of abortion pill reversal. We're grateful for our team at APR Network. The folks that are answering, our nurses are answering those calls around the clock. We're grateful for that, and we're well over 7,000 babies that we calculate have been saved through Abortion Pill Rescue Network, and it's growing, right? We continue, it's counting, right? We're actually rushing towards 8,000 faster than we got to 7,000. So we're excited for that. Excited for opportunities. We just need to make sure that we're mindful of the political processes that are in play, of some of the post-Roe realities that we're dealing with as the abortion industry continues to move towards chemical abortion. More and more of those things online that we are challenged by as a movement to be better about. And we're grateful for our friends on the Hill and in states across the country that are willing to tackle this. And there's some very aggressive things that are going on our behalf that we would celebrate, that states are trying to defend their ability to care for their smallest residents, right? That is something I heard out of the mouth of the governor of the state of Florida, Jeb Bush, when he was. It surprised me because I like any politician that would so directly speak to the value of the lives of its own citizens. Like, of course, every state should have that perspective, and we're grateful when we see that it happens and wish that it would happen more often, even amongst our abortion states. But thank you, ladies, for joining the opportunity. Grateful, Jessica, for joining the team. We're glad to have you with us, and thanks for being. You're within a lot closer to the DC area than we are, and you can jump in some meetings for us at Heartbeat. And we are grateful for that as well. And so, well, with that, other than be on the lookout for the things we talked about that are coming quickly, the March, a season of elections, which includes primaries, by the way, that will come faster than you know. And also the other good things that we'll be watching out for. Babies Go to Congress to see when that happens. And if you haven't, be sure to check on the information regarding our conference that's coming up in March 2026. Well, we have some workshops about stuff that we've talked about today, and you'll learn a heck of a lot more. And we look forward to you signing up for that as well. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Really interesting discussion we've had today. We're looking forward to the new year and what 2026 holds. We're praying for all of our pregnancy help organizations out there. We look forward to working with you guys more, strengthening the movement, and just building a culture of life together. So with that, I hope you all subscribe to this podcast if you have not already. We have more coming your way. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.